It's August 2nd, 2020, during the pandemic, and we're having an interview with Donald Hagaman. That's Donald A. Hagaman, my father. And we'd like to start off this 30-minute interview by telling us a little bit about your family, some of your siblings, where you were born, and where you were raised. Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we uh, we were fortunate enough to have four children. Tim is the oldest, Brian and Mary and Tom. Uh, we moved to Illinois in 1965, and we've been here ever since in the same house. I think we're in a rut. We lost Janie about 4 years ago, and it was a big surprise. She had cancer. But we're getting along. I've been without a companion now for 4 years. And I guess I'm doing okay. I don't like being alone. But the siblings do come home once in a while. As Tim was here today, and Tom was coming a couple of weeks, and Brian, he was here a couple of weeks ago. We I schedule it so that I get most of the hard stuff uh, done around the last week. It was 2 weeks ago. It was we cleaned the eave troughs, which were about full, and then we had Brian. He had uh, some weed killer. I look around here. He was killing the weeds. You know, we have a lot of creepy Charlie, and we have a lot of weeds that are wild. It must be a fertile soil here in Illinois. It's daylilies all over the place, and
And yesterday you had construction equipment here.
yeah. Yesterday we had dig up our uh, one part of our basement. Uh, uh, what do you what do you call it? The drains that come from the basement uh, were plugged, and we had to get somebody out.
And how long have you been maintaining this house?
Well, you know, as I said, we moved here in '65, and we've been here ever since. And we've added on. We've done some work in the basement and rec room, and put a deck on, and we keep cutting the trees back a little bit because the trees are going to take us over here one of these days. Because when we moved here, there was about 10 trees that were very close to the house. We had to have those taken out at about $500 each. And now it looks like to me we're going to have to do it again. It's mostly oak, and the rest of it I'm not sure.
So what were you doing in 1965 that brought you to Peoria?
Well, I worked uh, fresh out of college after I got married in 1957. Uh, I worked for American Cyanamid, uh, which is no longer in business. They were bought out by Pfizer, and moved. Uh, my boss at that particular time said that he moved to Illinois, and you can pick where you want to live. Uh, he said, we spill more feed in Illinois than we do in Michigan, and my job was to travel and call on feed manufacturers that produce feed for livestock and cattle.
And what was your degree in, and where did you go to school?
I went to Michigan State University in 1952. I have a twin brother. We decided after the Vietnam and the time they were in war with Korea, and we didn't have to go to Korea. We went to Germany, where we played athletics mostly. We came back with a GI Bill and went to Michigan State University for 4 years with a degree in agricultural economics and applied science. That was the good old days. My twin brother decided to stay and get his advanced degree in business and in agriculture, and he went to work for, I think it was Sherman-Williams, and then he was living in Columbus, Ohio at that time, and then I think he moved to Columbus, Ohio, and went back to school for something. Then he moved to Peoria. He went to work for the big Caterpillar as a marketing director. So we did get along pretty good for about 5 years. Then he decided to move out of Peoria, or his wife decided to move out of Peoria, because she was an accountant with the paper, and he moved back to East Lansing, Michigan,
So,
where he's developed a lot of horticultural things at the university.
so tell me more about your siblings.
Siblings, Tim has done a lot of different jobs over the
Your siblings.
huh?
Your siblings. Tell us what it was like growing up in Hillsdale, Michigan.
That area.
Tell us about what it was like growing up in Hillsdale, Michigan with your family.
Well, we grew up mainly in Hillsdale, Michigan. Uh, we had a big dairy farm there, and it was my dad and brother and twin brother. We helped out on the farm, and then we went to Hillsdale College one year to play athletics, and from there we got drafted into the military, U.S. Army. Uh, my sisters had 3 sisters, and they all worked, and a brother Richard, he was a mechanic and worked in a tool shop. So I've had some experience growing up on the farm. We did everything. That's probably one of the reasons why we ended up not going back to the farm, because it was just too hard. And going to school was a real pleasure, and we both, as a result of being at Michigan State with a degree, we went. He went with a chemical company, and I went with American Cyanamid, and did a lot of traveling.
The last time we were in Hillsdale, we went to the poor farm. Tell us about what it was like living in the poor farm and why was it a poor farm?
I really never lived in a poorhouse, and there's a question of whether it was a poorhouse or a house. The poor farm, over the years, uh, had mentioned that there was another farm at a different location where uh, men stayed and were involved in running a farm. So I don't know that I ever experienced living in the poorhouse. There was a statue in the front yard that said it's a Will Carlton porch farm. But I seemed like it wasn't a poor farm because we all enjoyed working and we had plenty of food. And went to Hillsdale High School and Hillsdale College. We were well known in that area for our athletic ability.
So, the house that we visited is now the Museum of the Historical Society in Hillsdale. Is that the only house that you remember growing up in?
Yeah, Dad uh, uh, got a chance to rent a farm, and then he brought in a lot of animals, and we took care of a lot of milk cows, and Mom, she liked chickens, so we had at one time 4 or 5 thousand head of chickens, and that it's the sun's too bright, Tim.
Okay. So why don't you move your chair over?
Is that better?
Yes. I have a view of the kitchen and dining room table. So, tell us what it was like with your parents and tell us their names and where they came from.
Well, my my dad, it was his second marriage, uh, and it was my mother's second marriage. Their offspring or their mates were involved in accidents, and then Mom and Dad got back together in Pioneer, Ohio. That's where I was born, and my brother was born there also, along with three girls and three boys. It was a lot of fun, I think. As I look back, we lived at Pioneer, and we lived in Hillsdale County, finally ending up at Hillsdale, Michigan. And I don't think we ever really had any time that it was tough. It was hard work, but we always had plenty to eat. Mom always said a nice thing about living on a farm is you have plenty to eat. You know, you have fruit trees, and you have vegetable gardens, and you have milk cows, and you have plenty of milk and plenty of food. And but everybody got married and moved away, and that's what brought me to Peoria, Illinois.
And did you walk to school? Um,
Well, we had about a mile to school, and we uh, we walked some. Dad used to take us sometimes. We I would say that my junior and senior year, we were fortunate enough to buy an automobile, so we didn't have to run or walk to school. It was a Model A Ford, big big deal back in the 30s. But I was born in 1932 and moved from there uh, as a young, uh, I would say we went to a rural school uh, where there was 8 students, and 6 of us were Hagamans. And I still remember the teacher uh, that taught us, a wonderful lady. Uh, from there, of course, we moved to Hillsdale, where we entered junior high and graduated from Hillsdale High School.
you had showed me where your mother had had a heart attack at the dinner table. Do you think that how many kids did you have, and do you think she just got overworked?
Well, she was overweight. She loved to cook. And the doctor said, you know, back then, uh, cholesterol was still a big issue. And my mother died of an overload of cholesterol in her bloodstream. And the only thing they had back at, in the 40s, early 40s, I can remember she was diagnosed with her veins had plugged up with cholesterol, and she had a heart attack and died immediately. One evening, one Sunday evening, when we were at the dinner table playing cards, and that was terrible. That was a terrible blow. But you know, we got by very well after that. The girls took over and did a lot of the cooking and cleaning, and we had a very nice house.
What was their personality?
Hmm?
What was your mother's personality like?
Oh, she was a hard-working uh, mother. She was, if she wasn't baking, she was cleaning, and if she wasn't cleaning, she was outside taking care of chickens.
And your father?
And my father spent most of his time taking care of the horses and also the cows. And I guess the hardest part of being on the farm at that time was that we had to harvest the hay. We had we had to cut the hay and bring it in and put it in the barn for the cows. That was during the hottest time of the year.
Now, when you went to the Korean War, what was your mission?
Yeah, we were drafted at that particular time, the Korean War, and we we decided to go and get it over with. And of course, there was a lot of benefits, and you could spend a couple of years in the military and come out with GI Bill where you could go to any school in the country. And that's the time we chose Michigan State University.
And did you play football in Korea? And do you remember what it was like to be in Germany? And
Well, Germany was okay. I remember we landed at Bremerhaven, Germany, and from there the commander said, "Well, you've been playing football at Hillsdale College, and we'd like to have you go out for football here." That was in Nuremberg, and we played football, and my twin brother, we played baseball and we played basketball, and
and who was your coach?
you know, I don't, I don't know. He was a hard-nosed captain.
Didn't
I
he
think it,
coach at Michigan State?
no, I think his name was Bishop.
Okay.
Sounds familiar. And he had 4 or 5 other coaches that coached the Second Armored Cavalry. That's the football team, and we played other cavalry units in Germany, and it was a pretty good squad. There was eight guys on the team that had contracts to play pro football. There was about 90 football players that tried out for the team.
And you were a halfback with your twin brother Ron.
And we both played football and didn't get hurt.
Tell us about when you met your wife Jane.
Well, when we came back from Germany and went to Michigan State University, and that's where I met my wife Jane. She was in school there at Michigan State to become a teacher, and she taught school a couple of years there in East Lansing, Michigan. So we finally got married on June 30th, in 1957, and we were married for 60 years.
And where did you live in Michigan when you got started? You can move the chair again.
That sound seems follow me around here. There, that feels cool.
Okay. So where did you live in Michigan after you got married?
Well, we moved around a little bit. We lived in Lansing, East Lansing, Michigan. We lived in Kalamazoo, and then I went to work for American Cyanamid, and they transferred me around. And finally, we were in Ottawa, Michigan, and from there we went to Rochester, Michigan, and we spent a couple of years there. and went back to Lansing, Michigan, and then we transferred after a couple of children. We transferred down here to Peoria, Illinois.
Tell me the story about going to Garden City. Remember when you went to Garden City and you were supposed to consider relocating?
Garden City, yes. I had a chance to move to Garden City, Kansas, and I went out there, and there were cattle as far as I could see. You know, this was a big capital of Kansas, where they had a lot of cattle, range cattle, that they fed out in Kansas City. And all I could smell when I got off the airplane was cows. And I decided that I'd rather smell hogs than I would cows. And so I didn't move.
So tell us a little bit about raising 3 sons and a daughter in Peoria, Illinois, and what are some of your fondest memories of watching your kids in sports?
Well, you know, they were all fortunate enough to be athletes. You know, the boys played football and basketball, and they seemed to get busy playing sports in high school, and then they went off to school. Uh,
And in your work, did you travel a lot?
yeah, I traveled to several big companies, East Lansing. I traveled to East St. Louis to visit Ralston Farina Company and
The stockyards?
the stockyards, and I had a lot of experience calling on feed manufacturers in Illinois because there was a lot of feed manufacturers, but they're all gone pretty much now. Most of the cattle are fed out west, and they go to market out west rather than in the area.
If your wife, Jane, was sitting right next to you, what would you tell her today?
What would I do? What?
What would you tell Jane if she was sitting right next to you right now?
What a question that would be. She was a lovely lady. She was very helpful, hardworking, took great care of the kids, and they all grew up and got married. So I miss her dearly.
Well, my last question is, tell us about the world controversies in your life. We're in a pandemic right now. What is this the greatest disaster that you've ever experienced? And you've
Yes,
also seen various other disasters in your life.
the pandemic is very confining. I've been quarantined now for a couple of months, and my children don't want me to go out because they feared that I'm too old to get through the problems that are associated with the sick people that you know, there's several million people died here in the United States of the pandemic, and the virus has been very tough for a lot of people, business as well as working people, and people that are raising a family, the schools are, they're pretty much shut down. The athletics are pretty much being rescheduled. Of course, there's places to eat out are somewhat limited, and they will be until they tell us that we can enjoy being out and amongst people. Right now, the governor says, we don't want you having a big party someplace. We want you to stay under cover, so to speak, and wear a mask. And if you have to travel, that's one thing. But if you stay at home, that's another thing. We'd like to have most of the people just stay at home. Uh,
Well, our 30-minute interview has ended. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
no, I've talked about long enough.